Okay, hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
Yes, you just gave a little clap like they do in the movies to sync up the sound in the video.
I have no idea why I did that.
No, that's cool.
I just felt like I needed a happy joy clap. I don't know why. I guess because I'm excited about talking about this movie, even though it's not like a movie to be excited about per se, but
Yeah,
it's definitely something.
I'm still super excited about talking about this movie. Today we're going to talk about the new movie starring Carey Mulligan called Promising Young Woman. It's written and directed and produced by Emerald Fennell. Carey Mulligan stars as Cassie. She's a medical school dropout who is living with her parents, and she's 30 years old. She's working at a coffee shop. She goes out to bars every weekend and acts drunk, allows guys to take her home. She then calls them out for trying to have sex with a person who's not capable of giving consent, let alone knowing who they are. This all kind of stems from a situation that happened earlier in her life at medical school to one of her friends, to her best friend. And so the movie kind of picks up from there. And I think that if you've seen the trailer, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on, and the trailer's so effective that it's what got me excited about it. I think it's what got you excited about it, and the trailer is so well done. I just want to see how the writer puts together all these visuals, and I want to see Carey Mulligan in a role that she can really sink her teeth into. So what got you excited about at least wanting to watch it?
There's the trailer where you see that she's intoxicated and the guy's kissing her on her neck, and then all of a sudden she comes out of her fake intoxication and he says, "I thought you were," and she goes, "Drunk? I'm not." And the way she says that, I'm obsessed with it. There's just this, I don't even know how to explain it. I almost hesitated to bring it up on the podcast because I don't think I can clearly articulate why I was obsessed with it. There's just certain times where only that actor can say that line that way. And I'm sure it could have been interpreted 1,000 different ways. But being in auditions and hearing people read for the first time, when somebody does something like that, everything changes. The temperature in the room changes when somebody hits a line in a way that only they can do it. And a lot of times that person gets cast, and a lot of times they don't, but they brought something new and different, and you can just see the way people react to it. And it's not something you can attempt to do. It is just par for the course with who you are as an actor. So when she does it a couple times in this movie, and I'm thinking to myself, she's so entrenched in this character that I think only she could have done it like this. So I've been intrigued with it ever since, and I've been a little scared of it and a little nervous to live in this world when I'm watching it, and I pretty much was right. It's a tough movie. It's not an easy ride, and it shouldn't be because it's a serious subject matter. But I've learned some things, and I've researched some things based on it, and I've also discovered what I think the movie's really about for myself.
Yeah, what you felt like with the line reading she had when she was with Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I felt the same way about that first scene that she has with Adam Brody, where she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's all like drunk saying, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And then she looks at the camera that's above the bed and says, "What are you doing?" Like, I mean, that way that she says it, you're just like, "Oh man, oh." And then that's the whole kind of, I think, to me, that's one of the big points of this movie is if you feel weird about this movie, then you probably should feel weird about this movie. Like if you get all like hot under the collar or it makes you identify with situations in real life, then maybe you do need to go back and reevaluate those things, that kind of a feeling. And so I love how it's packaged in this hyper stylized, and I texted you after I watched it and I just said like dripping with style. Like that is what it's like saturated. It's like the sponge and there's just style oozing out of it. And that is everything from the costume design to the music choices to the set design. I mean, it is every single thing to me that I've analyzed and that I've looked into. There's just another layer and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that, we talk about tone all the time and we don't talk as much about style, but I think style is something that is also super important to me. So I need something that has a good story structure. I need something that has good tone or at least command of tone, and then a good pace or a logical pace for me. And this has all of those things. And that's what draws me to this movie. Even the marketing for the film, the posters are hyper sexualized posters, because I think that I'm wondering if people are going to go to this movie expecting one thing and getting another. And I think that's kind of what somebody like Emerald Fennell would revel in, would be like, oh, hey, you left this movie hopefully thinking about something that you haven't thought about, or hopefully coming out with another point of view and another direction to take your thoughts. But it's also funny, and it's also chilling, and it's scary at sometimes, and it plays with the audience. I mean, really, I think it's kind of hostile with the audience, and it's not a bad thing, but I think it does show a command of tone and a command of how they know that an audience will react to certain things, or they can imagine how an audience will react to certain things. And for a first-time filmmaker, I think that's kind of amazing. And it's not lost on me that the only clip of any movie that is included in this movie is Night of the Hunter, which is also an actor, first-time filmmaker. So hopefully she doesn't have the same path as Charles Laughton in that he didn't ever direct any other movies. So I'm excited to see what else she's going to do. But let's talk a little bit about Emerald Fennell, who is currently in The Crown. Are you watching The Crown?
Yep.
Okay, so she's Camilla Parker Bowles in The Crown. So
yes, she is.
And she also has a very small cameo in this movie, but she's also a writer, and she was the showrunner for the second season of Killing Eve. Have you watched any of Killing Eve? Have we talked about this?
Oh, you've asked me before, and the answer is no, and it's just because of time.
Yeah.
I'm 100% interested in it. I love everything about the actresses that are in it. I watched Fleabag, so I'm familiar with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And so I want to. It's just a matter of, it's just time. Now that I have an new technology, I have everything underneath my fingertips, and it's a good thing, but it's also a 2:00 in the morning thing where it's like, gotta go to bed, turn off.
There's only so many minutes in the day. Yeah, but that's another show that, I mean, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge in general, like everything that she's been involved in, especially writing, she is a master of tone, and that show in general, it does so well with sliding from humor to dread to suspense to action. I mean, it's really, really well done. So she has a certain pedigree, Emerald Fennell does. Let's start getting into the movie. So I think that just in reading about how the seed was planted in Emerald Fennell's brain was that she had not specific experiences in the past, but she kept thinking about how she could push back against people who might have been in these types of situations. And it's funny, the first characters that we see, how Cassie, the main character, interacts with these men, is that they're not necessarily like broed out men. They're guys who are trying to kind of take advantage of a situation, and they're not trying to quote unquote rape the women. But at the same time, there's no way that she could ever give any kind of consent in these situations. So like you said, that tone shift when she is saying to, whether it's Adam Brody or Christopher Mintz-Plasse, oh, so it's weird now that I'm not drunk? Like, why is it weird? Like that to me was the key to those first few scenes.
I think it's important, and it's quintessential to the theme that I took from the movie, that the guys have to be nice guys in the beginning, meaning that Adam Brody, he is telling his friends to chill out, calm down, it's cool, stop treating her like that, stop talking to her like that. Basically is like, okay, I'll go be the nice guy, because you get the impression he's saving her from them. So it's essential you think Adam Brody is a good guy until he does what he does.
But he thinks he's a good guy too.
Because I think, the world thinks he's a great guy.
Yeah.
That's the point to the movie for me. It's about perception. The perception of society says if a woman is too intoxicated, it's her responsibility if something bad happens. Not the world should be responsible for a vulnerable human being that she wore too small of a miniskirt, or her pumps were too high, or she was too drunk. They even talk about that in the film. Where's her responsibility in that? Her responsibility is being a human being who is expecting other human beings not to take advantage of her, and in particular, men. So when you think a character is going to help somebody and then they turn out to be exactly the opposite of that, that's important because I think that's the theme of the movie, at least for me, is that we are spending the world explaining and apologizing for men who do this versus telling them, don't do this. It is not okay. No matter how you look at it, this is not okay. And instead of saying you were completely in the wrong, you cannot do these things to people. You can't do this to women. They are forgiven and they are made excuses and they are told it's not their fault. And then they blame the woman because it couldn't possibly be this nice guy who chose to do this bad thing. He was just trying to help her out. She gave him an indication when she was back at the apartment that it's always an excuse for the men. And that's what this movie's about for me. If you watch it, you don't even have to watch it closely. It is a stop excusing men for their behavior and stop excusing men because society tells them it's okay because she was too drunk or because she wore a miniskirt or because she decided not to go home with her friends and decided to dance one last dance with you. Whatever it is, it's not your fault. And the way that this film etches its way through that scenario is amazing to me because you cannot come away from this film without that understanding. And like you said, if you do and you think that this film was something that it wasn't, and you're uncomfortable with it, then the film is speaking to you. It's not speaking to women. It's not telling women to defend themselves. It's not telling women, don't wear a miniskirt, don't get too drunk. That's not what it's saying. It's saying, men, you suck. Stop this. Well, the men in these situations, the world has to stop making excuses for it. Society has to stop making excuses for it.
Well, and I think that with the Adam Brody character, it seemed like, he really thought that he was, especially when they were in the back of the Uber, it's like, oh, I'm going to take her home. And then he's like, oh, we've got a connection. His reality and our reality as the audience and Cassie's reality are completely different. It's not like he's some mustache twirling villain, but at the same time, he needs to understand that he has to be respectful of other people and he has to understand what the difference is between someone who is in the active motion of passing out and someone who is coherent enough to say like, hey, sure, I will come up to your apartment and have a drink with you. And especially after that first scene with Adam Brody, we get the title sequence, which is the kind of pixelated, pink dripping, promising young woman titles with the It's Raining Men cover behind it. And her walking with this amazing dolly up shot that we get to see a little bit of like something red on her leg and then some more red on her shirt and then red all dripping down her arm. And then we realize, oh, she's just eating a hot dog. And that to me was just, once I saw that, I was like, I'm in. That's it. We're done. Like, this is going to be great. And so you're subverting expectations right off the bat. And I love that. They're able to also kind of like do the same thing in the very next mini scene where the guys are catcalling her. And instead of her either walking away or yelling back at them, she's just like staring at she's just letting them sit in and realize what they're doing and letting them realize that they're actually talking to another human being. And they get really uncomfortable. And I think that this character has understood, number one, she's understood the ability that she has to affect men, number one, and number two, she's also understood how much the men that she's affecting aren't able to see anything but a particular point of view, and she's forcing them into another frame of mind. And that's the only weapon she has because she's a very small woman. Like, she can't, clock somebody in the face. So she's got to figure out a different way to affect these men.
It's brilliant. Because what would you do? Why are you catcalling at a woman? What are you going to do? You're going to go into the porta potty?
Yeah, she's going to walk over there and be like, hey, let's go. Let's go back to your place.
Have you ever met? Oh, yeah. Johnny, let me sit down and tell you about how I met your grandpa. We screwed in a porta potty after he catcalled me and I fell in love. I mean, who does that? Like, what woman responds to that?
But yeah, so I think that we kind of find out that the Cassie character, once she gets back to her house, she opens up that journal, the little booklet that has the scrunchie on it, and she marks down another mark. I noticed that, number one, there's different colored pens, which means that she's gone through different pens, number one. Number two, when she marks it down, she marks it so hard, she pushes down so hard on the paper that as she flips through the pages, you can see there's pages she hasn't used and you can still see the marks. And I don't know, they're not Roman numerals, but they're just kind of like hash marks, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 5th hash mark is a diagonal cross across it. And you can see that impression in the unused paper, which means that when she's writing it down, she's writing it down with intensity, with force and with emotion. And so it's the first time we see that. It's also the first time you get a little bit of a close up on her fingernails, which her fingernails are a theme throughout the movie. And I noticed it a lot the first time, but mainly the second time, just the fact that, number one, the character has so many different clothes and I don't want to say costumes. What do normal people wear? Outfits? The people who aren't on a set.
I wouldn't venture to say it wasn't costumes because she's definitely playing a character
You're
for
right,
a reason.
You're right.
So costume is appropriate on a bunch of different levels.
So she has so many different costumes, but her fingernails are always the same. And it's these pastel colors that each finger has a different color. And so we'll kind of see that come back later on in multiple ways. But yeah, so we get introduced to this. And then the next shot, which I think is amazing, is a side shot of her sitting at the kitchen table with her parents. And the shift in style in set design is huge because we've just been to a club and we've been to the creepy dude's house, and now we're in this like time capsule from 1978. I don't know. It's amazing. But yeah, it's just been kind of like shrink wrapped in nostalgia, I guess. And so she's at home, she's wearing a pink robe, which also pink is another theme, but she's wearing a pink robe, and we get to meet her parents, Clancy Brown and Jennifer Coolidge, who it's so great to see Jennifer Coolidge in a role like this because I knew that she could do it. I just have only seen her in Christopher Guest movies, and that we used to be a CBS affiliate, and there was like a show, Two Broke Girls, I think. Yeah, Two Broke Girls. I think she's in that.
Yep, that's it.
So yeah, that's all I've seen her in.
Yeah, she's definitely in that.
And I'm sure she's been in other stuff, but it's good to see her in a film that allows her to stretch a little bit. And she doesn't have a big part, but still, it's good to see that. Yeah, and then we get to go to the coffee shop with her and meet Gail, played by Laverne Cox. And that kind of gives us a very quick idea of what her everyday life is. Then she marks another mark on her journal with wearing pigtails, and some other creepy guy who we don't see asks her how old she is. And it's just like super creepy and gross. And then we're back at the coffee shop. We get to meet Bo Burnham. Did you notice that she's reading a book? It's called Careful How You Go. And that's a reference to a short film that Emerald Fennell directed. So there's all kinds of little things dropped in here. It's really cool. But yeah, so we get to meet Bo Burnham's character, Ryan. Seeing him on screen, I haven't seen him on screen or in a TV show for a long time, but I just reminds me of his comedy specials that he's had. And he's charming, and he's able to get his way into her brain in his own way. And I think we're kind of spoilering these things, but
I think we need to let people know they need to experience this film. You need to see it up front. I wouldn't want to know anything about it. I didn't know anything other than the trailer about it, and I think you shouldn't know anything about it. So yeah, let's do spoilers. Go see this movie, watch this movie, talk about this movie, tell your friends about this movie. It is something that we need the seed of this film to grow in our society and start to affect it in a good way, in a positive way. It's a hard film. It's not an easy film to watch. It is not going to leave you happy-go-lucky. It is a tough film. So that said, it is an important film. I think you should see it.
Yeah, but hopefully the style will get you through the difficult parts and will be the glue to keep it all together for you, so that when you get to the end, you can be like, oh, what about that amazing scene? And then you can also say, hey, maybe we should talk about consent and figure out where we all land on this and get opinions from other people who may not be the same gender as me or look like me. So, all right, spoilers from now on.
I do want to say something about the Bo Burnham scene, the first scene. There is, when you're breaking down a character and analyzing a script, there are certain things that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to figure out your overall intention. You're supposed to figure out, that old saying, what's my motivation? It's essentially what's my intention. You have an overall intention, and then you have different beats inside the script, and you have different intentions, and you want to get something out of the character that you're on stage with or in a scene with. And there's this other thing that I always forget about until it's so smartly done, which is extremely well done in this movie, is that they say to you, make sure you read the script as, of course, when you read it in your cast, you read it from your character's point of view, and you always look at your lines first. At least that's what I do. But then you want to always go back. I mean, it's just the way that I am, because I always have to figure out if there's a word I can't pronounce, because then I have to start working on it right then and there, because it'll take me 6 weeks to get to it. Anyway, there's an analytical technique where you're supposed to read the script to see what the screenwriter, Emerald Fennell in this instance, says about your character. What do they say about your character? What do other people say about your character? What do you say about yourself? And in that scene where he goes, yeah, you can spin at it, I deserve it, and then she spits in his cup, right then and there, as an audience member, we should be made aware, even on the most subconscious level, that Bo Burnham is not who he is presented to be. He says, go ahead, I deserve it. I deserve to have my coffee spit in. And you think it's kind of like this kind of fun banter back and forth where he's trying to be charming, and she's kind of like, whatever, dude, I'm not into you. Leave me alone. Stop talking to me. And he's realizing that she's a beautiful woman, and probably these guys come up to her all day long just to chat her up at the coffee shop. And he's never expecting her to spit in his coffee. And the fact that she does is great, because that's exactly what you want to see in this circumstance. In this type of movie, this is exactly what you want to see. But that's my point. The screenwriter told you everything you needed to know about Bo Burnham in one scene. And so I don't think I picked up on that immediately, but I was weary of him because of all the other men up to this point.
For me, that scene where she spits in the coffee, it seems like he's just being self-deprecating. This is what I got from it, is that he's being self-deprecating, and he's trying to kind of like one up her as far as like, oh yeah, you can totally spit in my coffee.
Yeah.
Understanding that like, well, she's a nice young woman. She's a nice lady. She's not going to do that. And then she's ratcheting it up even one more level. And she's like, I will do that. And then so he has to once again ratchet it up even a third level and say like, I will now drink your spit coffee. So it's a competing, see who gets up higher on the ladder type of absurdity type of a thing. And it's also endearing for each of the characters to each other, because they're kind of like, oh, your weird is my weird. So yeah, that kind of, I think that was kind of where, I don't know, it seemed to me that was where they were going with the characters. But I do see what you're saying though, where why would he say that if he didn't actually believe that, if he didn't have some like deep-seated level of doubt of himself or of guilt built into him for things that he's done in the past? I don't know.
Well, I'm not even saying he's that self-aware. I'm not sure he is that self-aware, because how could he be as in denial as he is? Okay. Because that's some of those things at the end of the film. I was like, wait, hold on, let me backtrack this and look at this, because I'm not sure. But it also is a statement that he can do and separate himself from something that happened in the past that you find out later on, and still act like he's this charming young guy. He does exactly what the men do in this film. But I'm saying that that's one level. I think the other level is he reveals something about himself that I'm not even sure the audience at that point should know, only on some kind of level. But people say things about themselves and reveal things all the time in life. You just have to listen to it, and they just have to not be aware of it. Because if you're aware of it, then you wouldn't say it. He recognizes her instantaneously. She does not recognize him. So he has got to know what the history is when he recognizes her. And so did he purposefully say, I'm disgusting, I deserve it, or whatever he says in that particular line? Probably not. But as a subconscious reaction to seeing her again for the first time, for me, that's what I would analyze from the scene. It's just something that stuck out. And there's 1,000 of those in this film where people say exactly what they are without realizing they're saying what they are.
He gets rejected after that whole scene. And so she goes out. This is where the cameo is by the director, Emerald Fennell. Cassie is watching a YouTube tutorial about how to put on lipstick, and the person in the tutorial is the writer. So that's kind of a cool little thing. Okay. And she's got an American accent, even though both of them are British. They're both British. And so they are, Carey Mulligan's doing her American accent, which I think is flawless. You can't tell that she's British. And I usually have a pretty good ear for those types of things. And she is amazing at it. But after that, that's when we get to the Christopher Mintz-Plasse scene. The character's name is Neil. And we get to see a little bit more of her. They're kind of revealing a little bit more. The Adam Brody scene, you don't really see much once she kind of snaps out of it. Well, snaps out of it for him. It cuts to the title sequence. But with the Neil scene, we get to see her methodology and what she actually does. I love that the first time we see Adam Brody, it cuts because we don't know at that moment how severe this character is. Especially if you've seen the trailer, you kind of know that she's out for vengeance. She's out for revenge for something that happened in the past. And we don't know how malicious she is. So we're able to kind of understand this far into the movie that she's not going to, cut off anything or physically harm the guy, but she's going to make him feel in some ways worse, have him realize what he looks like and what he could do to other people, how he could affect other people. And of course they get these guys. I mean, like Adam Brody was in a bunch of like the OC. I don't know what he was in. He was in a bunch of early 2000s TV shows, and he was the guy who, all the teeny boppers liked or whatever. And Christopher Mintz-Plasse was the McLovin. He's just like, how innocuous can this guy be? And yeah, he's kind of douchey, but he's not the classical someone you would think would sexually assault someone, but that could very well be what is going on. And that's what she's trying to do, is she's trying to subvert this kind of like, it's not the guys you'd be like, whoa, watch out for that guy. It's the other guys. It's the guy who actually comes up to you and says, watch out for that other guy, and then says, let me take you home.
What's interesting about that scene to me is that's exposition. That's her character explaining what she does nightly. And a lot of times in movies, they do voiceovers, or it's so dripping of explanation and exposition that you're like, okay, we get it, just move on. This was purposeful. This was intentional, meaning she is stalking him because of his behavior and because of what he could have done and might have done in the past. Future history dictates past history and so forth and so on. So the likelihood that he's done something like this is high. So she is, I wouldn't say scolding him, but she's definitely drilling him with, this is what I do. And without putting it between two characters, it would just be one explanation after the next. But that's why I think the screenplay is brilliant. And it's won quite a few of awards. Not that that's the end all be all, but the fact that it's two characters talking together and one character is using her story as a way of going at that guy and pretty much, pointing her finger at him and saying, kind of scum, dude. Like, what are you doing? This is what I do every night. And it's going to end up with you telling me you're a nice guy. But you're not. Here's why. Because I do this every night. At the same time, she explains everything we need to know about what she has been doing. So I think that's brilliant when it's between two characters and it's in an actual scene between two characters. I think it's great because exposition can weigh down a movie. Having too much explanation can weigh down a movie. It doesn't in this one. She does it as a character.
So we're able to see kind of her process in there. And then when she's writing the book, after that scene, she says goodnight to Nina. It's the first time that we see a picture of her and Nina and that we hear Nina's name. And it's also the first instance of their best friend's pendants. And they're both right next to each other hanging on the picture. So I didn't pick that up until the second time I watched the movie. And that's a big deal. There's all these through lines. I just love how there's all these clues and through lines, and they're just embedded into the film. And upon second watch, and I'm sure like more watches, there's things that I know that I will pick up. Just the color palette of the film, I picked up a lot more of the second time watching it. Just the instances of pink. And obviously her wardrobe is very feminine, whether she is trying to pick up men or whether she's just chilling around the house. But the instances of pink are a big deal. So did you feel like first instance of uttering Nina's name, did you feel like it was late in the movie? Did you feel like we needed to figure out what the impetus for her methods and for her actions? Okay. So I didn't either. I felt like it was, I was on board to this point. Like I didn't need to know what the backstory was necessarily. I felt engaged enough in the story to know that I felt in good enough hands to know that it was going to be explained to me at some point.
Well, because it's a movie, you need the backstory and you need the reason why she is taking revenge. Being a vigilante, she's sort of Batman if you think about it. I mean, she's had a trauma. The trauma turned her into somebody else, and she's taking her trauma and turning it into something that I don't know if it's constructive for her. I don't know if it's healthy for her, but it's making
it's a coping mechanism. But so it's definitely not healthy for her. I think it's beneficial for the people in her society because she's able to turn these guys around, probably. but it's definitely not for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it is.
Okay. Okay, we'll have another discussion about that maybe the second or third year after we've seen this film a couple of times. But my point to that was that we don't need to know there's a specific purpose behind why she does it, because we know men do this. So the movie could have very basically been a revenge film about men's choices in this society that we accept and we apologize and we make excuses for. It could just be that. It could just be a woman who's sick and tired of men treating women like this. It makes it a really enthralling film because there is that backstory. It doesn't necessarily need to be there, but without it, it doesn't give texture to it. So that's why I never questioned it. I never thought to myself, there's like a deeper purpose. I did wonder that going into the movie, why is she doing this? But if it ended up being that somebody just messed with her in college, I would have been fine with that too. But it makes it deeper that it affected somebody else. Somebody else had this trauma happen to them and they were both affected by it. And she ends up doing what she's doing because this thing happened to her friend. So it makes it just more textured.
Yeah, well, we find out later on that she has extreme guilt about not being there for Nina in her time of need. And I think this is her coping mechanism for that. And that's the main reason why I say that. And also, I don't think that Emerald Fennell, it thinks that revenge movies, I mean, everybody likes revenge movies. I mean, look at John Wick. Like, John Wick is awesome. But at some point, he's still killing a bunch of people. So, I mean, it's not like revenge movies, if we're trying to look at this from an altruistic standpoint, it's not like she's necessarily cherubic. She's not just some angel, although we'll get to some imagery later on in the film. But okay, so we're at the point now where Bo Burnham comes back and she does say that she will go out with him at this point. But before she actually goes out with him, we get to see her parents watching Night of the Hunter on TV. Actually, her dad's asleep, I think, and her mom is watching Night of the Hunter. And it's a very specific scene in Night of the Hunter where Robert Mitchum is driving and he's saying, like, he's talking to God and he's like, oh, you have all these things, these women have these lacy things and perfume smelling things and things with curly hair, and he's just like railing against God because of what he feels about these things about women. And I thought, first of all, Night of the Hunter is also someone who preys on other people. And so I think that in some ways that maybe, I don't know, I'll get your opinion on this, is that Emerald Fennell tipping her hand at saying that, like, okay, this character, much like Robert Mitchum's character in Night of the Hunter is obviously a horrible person where he, is a serial killer. She may not be the paragon of virtue in this movie, even though she is our protagonist in this revenge film. She may not be the quote unquote good guy, even though she is the good guy. Like it's a conflicting thing. I don't know. Like, why do you think that he put that particular Night of the Hunter scene in there?
See, I didn't take that from that at all. I think Laverne Cox is the reflection of who Cassie is as a person if this situation didn't occur. In other words, her friend, who's also her boss, who knows she doesn't want to work at the coffee shop. This is not what you're meant to do. You need to move on with your life. And how Cassie interacts with her, Laverne Cox's character, is how Cassie is as a human being, and that she is not the lead character in Night of the Hunter. She is a good person doing questionable things. She's Batman. I know that people are going to laugh at me saying that, but that's who Batman is. But Batman also, as well as Cassie, will be examined for their choices, their questionable choices. Is it a means to an end? Is what she's doing right because of what she wants to be said and wants people to realize and men to realize you can't do this? So really, you don't know until later on in the film. She never really breaks the law. She never really does anything other than pretends to be drunk. To me, that scene is exactly what I was talking about in the beginning of the podcast. That men are crying out to God and blaming God for their lustful thoughts towards women, because why would you make them smell so good? And why would you make them so pretty? And why would you make them wear all these frilly clothes? And why would you? It's not my fault. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I think that scene is. Of course, it's not I almost cussed. Get your sexual identity and sexuality in check yourself. It is not somebody else's responsibility to be in control of your sexual needs. And if you turn it into it's her fault or his fault, or no means yes or any of that BS that we apologize to men for in this society. It's none of that, because we can't look at it that way. A woman should be able to wear anything she wants to wear and go anywhere she wants to go and do anything she wants to do. A man never walks into an apartment complex to rent an apartment and worries about being on the first floor. Never. Unless, God forbid, something already happened to him. Women all the time have to say, do you have anything on the second or third floor? Because I can't live on the first floor because somebody could break in and hurt me. Okay. Yes, of course, somebody could break in and rob some guy or whatever and his valuables. But they're not worried about being sexually abused because they're on the first floor or sexually watched because they're on the first floor. So that's the scene for me. The scene, it's in particularly interesting that her father is asleep and her mother's the one watching it. The father is asleep and the woman is watching the film. So that's what that scene is for me.
That's smart. That's good. Yeah. All right. So she goes out to her first date with Ryan and they have a great time, but then at the end of the date they start talking about their past at the university that they went to medical school at, and he brings up a couple of different people. He brings up Madison McPhee and Alex, and the first time I watched it I didn't pay attention to it, but second time he's talking to her about Alex and she's like, oh, I don't even know that guy. And Alex is the guy who we can tell very quickly that Alex is the guy who attacked and raped Nina and actually had her to a point where she was so drunk she was essentially she was passed out, or one could say anesthetized. Well, when you listen to how Ryan talks about Alex, is that, oh, well, he always lands on his feet. Oh, he's coming back. He came back here. He's engaged. Yeah, he's got a job here. He's an anesthesiologist. So it's just like this thing writes itself. So this guy who in medical school took advantage of a woman who was completely passed out is now someone who professionally makes people pass out, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, I thought that was classy way of adding that in there.
And I read this whole article about how we are in a society that, is it Oscar worthy? Should it be nominated for the Oscar? Is it Oscar nominatable? As if that brings value to the film that the film didn't have before. Any film, not in particular this film. And I never want to come across, I have a love for the Oscars and I have a love for what it has brought to me in my world. We've talked about this many times. There are films that I would not know anything about in my past because of the Oscars have allowed me to go, oh, what's that movie? And then I watch it and I'm blown away. That's my purpose behind the Oscars. And it's fun to celebrate and it's fun to like have other people say, hey, I've been recognizing this film for months, and other people go, oh, well, the Oscars said it was worthy, so I must watch this now. And you go, yeah, well, I've been saying it for 6 months, but okay. So I'm not saying that the end all be all, and I will always say this about the Oscars, that they mean anything really. Deep down inside, a good film and a good project and a good script is worthy of just praise for being just that. But this film needs to be recognized by the Academy so it's out there as a screenplay that people can admire and look at. I don't think you should tell people what they should like, and I don't think that the Academy is the end-all be-all of that, but it is one of those things where there's some 15-year-old version of me, poor guy, lemon juice, that's a joke, okay, who is watching the Oscars and has no idea what this movie is because it just kind of passed him by, and then all of a sudden it's nominated for screenplay or best picture and best actress and all these things that it probably will be nominated for. And it gives you an indication that this screenplay needs to be examined. And you're exactly right, for these reasons like that, because the guy in med school did something to somebody passed out, and now he gets paid a lot of money to make people pass out. And God knows where his moral compass is when all that stuff happens. God only knows. Okay, so let's keep going on with Bo Burnham and their date, because I have a question about that. So after their first date, they're in front of his apartment complex, and he goes, oh, look, he pulls that old thing. I've run out of gas. I forgot to check the mileage on my car. Oh, wait, none of that stuff can happen nowadays because of technology. But he pulls out we've walked around the block and we're mysteriously in front of my apartment. Oh no. Would you like to go up, have a drink? And she's like,
just like all the other ones.
You turned into what's up? And then she turns and she walks away and she's frustrated because he's such a nice guy, or seemingly such a nice guy. And she kicks the trash can.
You gotta remember though, hold on, because it's not just like, hey, let's go upstairs. And she's like, no, I don't want to. She actually says, sure, let's go. Like she's like fine, we're gonna do this. And then he's like, whoa, I misread this. Like he's actually more in tune with her demeanor, that he understands that it's like, okay, this isn't right. I read the situation wrong. This isn't good. This isn't right. And she's like, no, let's go. And he's like, no, it's fine. We're good. She says, it's not you, it's me. That's what she says to him. Now, I don't know if that's just a reaction that she's said before just to kind of like smooth things over with a guy, but that's kind of what it feels like. See, that's the thing. Like, so what should she expect in this situation? I don't know. Like, see, that's the thing. Like I've it's been, 20 years since I've been on a date. So like a date without my, like with someone who I hadn't married. So yeah, it's I have no idea what the thing is here. Like how, like that seems weird to me already. Like, you go on one date and now it's like all of a sudden, let's go on upstairs by ourselves. And I guess they kind of know each other, but like they don't really like know each other. So that seems weird to me anyway. But either way, I don't really know what the situation is, but she ends up getting out of that situation. I don't think he would have been cool with her going upstairs after seeing her in the mental situation that she was in. Like, she was obviously, something was going on, and he knew that it wasn't a comfortable situation for her. So he, peaced out. He was like, okay, we'll figure this out later. And then she walks away and kicks the trash can.
So what are the expectations? There are no expectations. There should be no expectations unless it's mutually agreed upon that there's an attraction and that you can't not tear each other's clothes off. And you know the difference. And if you don't know the difference, I think that this is why this movie is important, because men sometimes, a lot of times, don't know the difference because their needs outweigh what the situation is. So they think that she just wants to rip her clothes off and have sex with him because that's what he wants. So this scene is very perplexing to me because I was confused about it a little bit. I think he definitely screws up and she lets him know, and she, silently says, don't catcall at me. That's all good. Then he says, oh, wait, I misread this situation, which it shows us that he's self-aware, that he knows the difference. And he's also brilliant because it's setting us up to believe he's not who he is really. Because if he is who he is, he would have never been involved with what we find out he's involved with later on in the film. So he is not who he's presenting himself to be. What I don't understand about the scene is this. She turns around and she kicks the trash can, in my interpretation, out of frustration that yet again, here's another guy who I genuinely liked, who I thought was different, turns out to be McLovin, and turns out to be the guy who, if I was intoxicated, probably would be pulling me up to his apartment as we speak. Damn it. So if I'm interpreting that correctly, then why does she ever go out with him again?
The way that I interpreted it was that she is in a situation where she's actually gone on a date with him, where he does know her name, he does know her history, he does know whatever her favorite color is and all this. He's not trying to have a transactional relationship for one night with her. He's actually trying to learn who she is, and he's attracted to her, she's attracted to him, and he may have wanted to move faster than she did. And her interactions with men have been so singularly focused for God knows how long, the last 6 years. I don't know how long she's been doing it, ever since she dropped out. I don't know. She's been so singularly focused in her interactions with men that now that she's in a situation where it's not that, has she, quote unquote, forgotten? Does she not remember what the potential of a good person can be, a good male counterpart could be? And that her initial reaction, even if, like, maybe he did want her to come upstairs. Maybe he wanted her to come upstairs because he wanted to show her his record collection. Maybe he wanted her to come upstairs because he baked brownies and he wanted her to have a brownie. Like, maybe he wanted her to come upstairs because whatever, because he wanted to watch Bridgerton with her. But she initially just cut off any kind of possibility of anything because she assumed that he wanted to get her upstairs to take her to bed. So we can look at all the other characters in the movie and we could be like, yeah, he probably did. And also she's Carey Mulligan and she's super hot. So why would he not want to do that? But maybe he would have the ability to pace himself. And, he kind of like lobbed one over the tennis net at her and she just spiked it right back at him and was like, no. Even though she didn't say no, he got that vibe. And so her walking away may have, I mean, that's kind of what I got from it, but maybe I'm a grubby, nasty man. I don't know. But I got from it that she was frustrated that she wasn't open to the possibility that he's not a sleazy dude. And that's her at that moment in this movie. Now, what happens later, maybe, yeah.
Wow.
Maybe it was different, but.
Well, your explanation, and I use that word pointedly, makes sense, because why does she continue to go out with him? Because if she does kick the trash can out of frustration of yet another guy who can't read the situation for what it is, it doesn't make any sense why she would give him another chance. That's so interesting how we took two completely different meanings out of one scene of a movie. Because she was frustrated that he overstepped his boundaries, because he does say, wait, I misinterpreted this, which allows the audience to know that there are men out there who can interpret the situation correctly.
I think there's an alternative universe where he could have said, oh, look, it's my apartment, let's go upstairs. And she said, sure, let's go upstairs. And that she would act like she would get drunk, and that he would come on to her, and that he would get all over her, and then she would do her whole spiel, and he would be another mark in her book, and she would move on. Like, there is an alternate universe where that could have happened. But because his character is not the same as McLovin and Adam Brody, and he said, whoa, I misread that wrong. I get your vibes, and I'm understanding them.
So if the scene ends and she's frustrated that she can't trust another person, especially a man, then why didn't she go up with him?
Because she has hope that he is not one of these sleazy guys, that he is because he pushed back on her even after she said, okay, let's go upstairs. She literally gave him verbal consent to go up to his room, but that's not what she was saying with her body language and with her demeanor. So he read that and was like, okay, let's hit pause. So anyway.
Okay. Well, let's move on, because it's fascinating, but I'm still not convinced what's what there.
Their interaction, though, brings up these two characters, Madison and Alex, and so she ends up getting on Friendster.space, Friender.space, which is neither Friendster nor MySpace nor Facebook. So they came up with some random Facebook thing that is called Friender.space, which I thought was hilarious. And she looked up Madison McPhee and finds out that she can contact her, and she's able to contact her. And then they go to lunch. And then there's a couple of really cool pieces in here. We don't have to go over like their whole lunch, but visually, red is a big deal in this scene. So first of all, Cassie's hair is totally different. It's straight, and she looks like a businesswoman. And so as they go through the dinner, she does the same thing with Madison that she does with the guys that she goes home with, in that she never drinks any alcohol. So she's completely in control, and she gets Madison drunk. And then by the time that Madison is, we know that she's gone through multiple bottles of wine. Number one, because she asks for another bottle of wine. But number two, and I think the most interesting choice, is that Alison Brie's teeth are super red. And I thought that was such a cool, first of all, it's cool that Alison Brie's like, sure, yeah, put whatever red you want on my teeth. I don't care. Like, she's game, which I thought was awesome. And so you can see the difference between her teeth and Cassie's teeth. And so that's a visual divider there. And then right at the end, she spills her wine glass, and so there's just this red kind of cascade going down the tablecloth right before Cassie gets up. And right before Cassie gets up, there's a framed shot looking up on her from kind of the table level, and there's a red halo around her head of just a single red light. All the other lights around are not red, but the light right above her head is red.
You did speak about style, but some of the framing shots in this film are right up my alley. I love when somebody's center and it's equal on both sides of them. She does that many times in this film. There are halos after halos after halos in this film. There's a shot when she's in the coffee shop, and there's that pastel blue.
It's a Lady Madonna shot. It's the Madonna portrait. I mean, because she's even looking to the side, looking down into the side, and it's so perfectly framed. But that's a little bit later on in the movie. But it is just, there's so many shots, even insert shots. There's like insert shots of like macaroons and stuff, and you're just like, oh my gosh. Or just even the shot where she's reading the book and she's got one of those straws in her mouth, and it's like the candy cane spiral kind of like a barber pole, and that's what the straws look like. Even the neon behind her is this kind of like pinkish reddish neon, and then later on we'll get to the pharmacy, pinkish reddish neon. So yeah, they leave no stone unturned. So
it's smartly done.
So Madison is number one. And so this first pink indicator at the center of the frame, one, which is, like an eye in the center of the frame. So we know that there's more to come. After that, she's back at the coffee shop. She's getting a bunch of phone calls from Madison because Madison obviously doesn't know what happened the night before because she was drunk and she was in a random hotel room. And I don't know if it's the first time, but they definitely keep her hands and keep her fingernails in frame. And she does this kind of like counting on her fingers that draws your eyes to her hands and gets you to really pay attention to her fingers and her fingernails and the pastel colors on her fingernails. And those will obviously come back later. So after that, she ends up going to number 2, which is Walker. And we get to see her pick up what we find out later is Dean Walker's daughter. And then she has a whole interaction with her. This is about halfway through the movie, and we're finally finding out what happened to Nina. This is the first time that we've kind of fleshed out that there's been any kind of exposition exactly what happened to Nina. And I think that's bold from a screenplay standpoint. But I think, once again, this movie is just chock full of style that it doesn't really matter. Connie Britton. Oh my gosh, Connie Britton.
Yeah, she's amazing. When is she not great?
She's also like a treasure. She's, the mom in Friday Night Lights, and she's on Nashville, and she's just like she just seems like a caring woman and this kind of like somebody who would be behind all women. And then she plays this character.
And that's why it's impressive that Emerald Fennell cast her, because that's exactly what we're expecting. And it is what we get. And at this point, you're right. We don't find out much. And then all of a sudden, there it is. And if you're not getting the point at this part of the film, by this part of the film, she explains it to you. The dean goes, well, what am I supposed to do? Ruin a whole life of this guy? Am I supposed to ruin his whole life? Because I get accusations like this all the time. And she says exactly what you need to know that the audience should have already realized at this point, that we are apologizing, we are making excuses and all that stuff for men who are doing things that if we held them accountable for just the wrong gesture or language or way you treated somebody, if we held people accountable for that, men in particular, then we would never be having this conversation with Dean Walker because we wouldn't be in this situation. So, hey, audience, listen up. Here's the point of the movie this far. The fact that we are going to say she was too drunk. We are going to say that her miniskirt was too short. We are going to say all that stuff. And somebody who is the dean of a school of medicine is going to use that societal interwoven structure into our DNA as the reason why she shouldn't have done anything in the case of Nina. And the thing that Carey Mulligan does in this character is never surprised by the way somebody reacts. It's almost like she knows that the dean is going to respond this way, just like she knows the men are going to respond this way. Well, how could she know that? Because of the trauma that she's been through, that her friend has been through? Possibly. Or that she was raised female in the society and we have interwoven these excuses for men up to this point. So she's not going to be surprised on any level. Guy does what he does, or if a dean says what she says, because that's what we are facing as a society. And so the way that Carey Mulligan plays it, she's not asking for anything from the dean. She's not telling her anything. She's not pointing her finger at her. She's just simply saying, do you remember? And you do remember? Okay, well, that's interesting because you didn't do anything and you don't seem like you're going to do anything now. I'm not going to ask you to do anything, but I'm going to make you walk in somebody else's shoes. I'm going to make you realize by the choices I've made, good or bad, whether you agree with what she does or not, she manipulates the situation, put her daughter in a situation, so she says, that is the same situation that Nina was in. So now the dean has no other way to look at it than what Nina must have gone through. The fear of what Cassie goes through every day is the fear the dean has at that moment.
And it's the same as at the beginning of the film when, close to the beginning when McLovin, is like, whoa, I thought you were passed out. And then she's like, wait, so it's weirder now that I'm not passed out? Like, shouldn't it be better that I'm not passed out? And it's the same thing with Connie Britton, where it's like, whoa, my daughter's not responsible for what's going to happen to her. And she's like, wait, you just told me that my friend Nina was responsible for what happened to her. She's not even using generic logic. She's saying that, like, wait a second, like, we're going to go with what you're saying with both of these situations. She's like, okay, fine. I will assume that what you're saying is correct. Now, in this reframed situation, if what you're saying is correct, then why is there an issue? Why is there a problem? And so she's essentially using logic. Now, it's malicious logic, but she is using logic, but it's a reframing of that. And I think that one key to that scene is the fact that she had Dean Walker's daughter's phone. And that was the linchpin of, whoa, she's serious. Like, she's not just blowing smoke. Like, she could have seriously done something to my daughter or put my daughter into the situation she said she's putting her into. So up until this point, she hasn't really done anything physically to anyone or anything. And the scene right after this is her sitting in the middle of an intersection with her head against the steering wheel, and a guy comes by her and just starts berating her until she gets out with a tire iron, and she just busts up his car, the sides of his car and his windshield, and then he drives off and he calls her all kinds of names. He calls her the nastiest names you can call a woman. That's the first time that she's actually done something physical to anyone or anything in the world, that as far as we know in this world. So, and that's just her. I think that that's just her frustration. Now, did she do a very similar thing where instead of being at a bar and acting like she's passed out, she was parked in the middle of the road, acting like she's just spaced out, and she was expecting a guy to come by her and berate her, and that gave her the excuse to go out there and bust up his truck? Maybe. I think maybe. And that's, once again, potentially her coping mechanism. That's not productive for anyone, really. I mean, maybe it helps her feel a little bit better, but it's not productive for that guy. That guy still thinks that women are spacey and they don't know how to drive and they just lay in the middle of an intersection. And he now thinks that women are crazy because one of the women who he thought was a horrible driver got out and busted up his truck. So really, it's that particular situation isn't doing anybody any good. But what did you get from that scene? I think it was a turning point.
I think that's interesting that that's your take on it. I don't think she's purposely pretending to zone out. I think she's zoned out because she's had a traumatized moment, and she's just she's forgotten she's in the middle of the road. And it's a simple human thing to do. It's like, you know, we have road rage as human beings, and I get that. And I'm not saying that's an excuse, but it does get frustrating when you're behind somebody. I know somebody who was paying for 3 or 4 people going through a toll, and the guy behind her was honking the horn the whole entire time. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And she was paying for them, just trying to do a nice thing. And then she said that she did notice as she was driving through how the guy kind of went through like stages of grief, like denial, acceptance, and all in the fact that he was realizing that she was paying and he was being a jerk because he was in a hurry. I can excuse those things. I think what happens in that scene is that she's just zoned out. It's when he starts to berate her with the terms and the language that he uses, the names that he calls her. That's when it turns into a Cassie guy thing. If he had just driven by and been like, what the hell is wrong with you? Jesus, I gotta go. Boom, and kept going, she would have been like, well, he's just a frustrated person. It's because he made it about her being a woman. And at that point, enough is enough. And she has a breaking point. And sometimes, and I'm not saying it's ever acceptable on any level, sometimes people act out physically. And sometimes, like in Waiting to Exhale, when Angela Bassett was enough with her husband, she burned all his clothes, put the clothes in the car and burned the whole car. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm saying we need to examine why as a society we allow men to push women to that point. And anybody, really, we don't even have to define it as men and women. Anybody who is pushed to a point where they act out, yes, physical harm to anybody's property or anybody's self is wrong. We know that. But why are we always saying she's acting crazy and she's acting like
I never said she was acting crazy.
Hysterical woman? I'm not saying you did. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying that in society. But we're not saying why is she acting like that? I'm not saying that's an excuse for what she does. But at this point, as an audience member, if you can't understand why she reacts the way that she does, I think you might need to continue to watch this movie until the end to finally get it. Because I think she's pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And then when somebody reacts after being pushed, we're like, why would you react that way? You should stay calm. You shouldn't physically hurt anybody or break their windshields. Why would you do that? Maybe not in that moment, but somewhere along the lines, if she was a friend of mine, I would have been like, what did he do to cause you to react that way? What did the situation do to make you just freak out like that? Not an excuse. You can't do that. That's wrong.
Yeah. So like, how do you get across to someone like that who's willing to call you those names? Like you being like, excuse me, sir, let's have a nuanced discussion about gender roles and your relationship to the women in your life that got you to the point where you're yelling at a woman who you don't even know who's in the road, instead of asking her how she's doing, or if she's got a problem, or if she's passed out, or if she's, not healthy. You were just yelling at her. So she can't do that.
Yeah. Hey, are you okay?
So she says she's not ready. She doesn't want to go out to the movie with Ryan. And she ends up, I think once again, as a coping mechanism, I could be wrong, I don't know. She ends up getting dolled up and getting picked up by one of the three guys who was at the beginning of the movie, played by Sam Richardson. And he picks her up, and then as they're walking out, she sees Ryan, and Ryan is really ticked off because she says she didn't want to go out with him, and now she's getting picked up by some other random guy and the whole thing. And then Sam Richardson says in a whiny voice, "Why do you have to ruin everything?" And then he runs away like a little kid. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, and then so she's in the doghouse with Ryan. The next thing that happens is number 3, Mr. Green, who's the lawyer who defended Alex. And she goes to Mr. Green's house. Alfred Molina. Like, are you kidding me? Like, we got Alfred Molina in there? Like, he's in there for like one scene? So it's awesome. So he's in there, and she says, "This is your day of reckoning." And he says, "I've been waiting." That is not what I expected him to say. And this whole scene plays out not like how we as the audience think it's going to play out, and also not like how she thinks it's going to play out, because she's done. Like you said, she's done. She's past some sort of breaking point with humanity, and she's like, I went to this dean and I tried to appeal to her, and she gave me exactly what I thought she was going to give me. Now I'm going to go to this guy, and he's going to tell me that he was just doing a job and that he doesn't remember any of them, and all of the things, all of that gets subverted with this character. And you're right. Some of the shots in there, when we see him sitting in the middle of his couch thing and she's opposite him, there's these two kind of like vase things on big, huge black things on the floor, and he's directly in the center of them, and it's symmetrical, and it's really smoky, which it evoked Boogie Nights for me. Do you remember the scene with him and his kid?
Yeah,
oh
absolutely,
my gosh.
absolutely.
And it's exactly the same kind of tension. We feel that tension. It's not somebody, firing off firecrackers, but just every sudden motion that he does, she actually, you can tell that she recoils. You watch her recoil, and she feels threatened. It's the first time that I was able to, as an audience member, understand that she is putting herself in threatening situations always. And she has some sort of faith that she can figure out a way to get out of them, or that she can manipulate them in a certain way. But in this moment, she's just not as big as this guy, and she's in this guy's house alone with him, and if he decided that he wanted to do something to her, he could. But the cool part is that in the script, he's the opposite. He's the one that's looking to her for forgiveness. And so it's the whole dynamics are all mixed up. But really the other line in there that is the most important line is when she says, "Do you want me to hurt you?" And he says, "I think so." And that's the moment where she realizes, well, first of all, he says he can't sleep. And so that moment when he's kind of like kneeling at her lap, and he's just like, I can't sleep. And she says essentially like, "Go to sleep, like you can go to sleep now." And she's crying. It's the first time we've seen her cry in the whole movie. And actually it's the only time we see her cry in the movie, I think. Yes. So anyway, that scene, when she leaves the scene, there's a guy waiting at her car, and she tells him that she doesn't need him. So she paid him to go beat this guy up. She paid him to go beat the lawyer up. Do you feel like she would have done that maybe before she would have gone to Dean Walker? If things would have gone differently at Dean Walker, do you feel like that was always the plan? To physically harm, by proxy, physically harm someone else? Or do you think she's like, I'm done? Like, this is it. Men are horrible. This man is horrible. All these men are horrible. It's over.
Well, I don't think, first of all, the lawyer is asking for forgiveness. I think he's asking for retribution.
You're right.
He's asking for what's coming his way.
Yeah.
he's
Piper.
not saying, I'm so sorry for this. Yeah. Yep. It's time. That's why he can't sleep. He's asking to be relieved of his self-imposed prison of his mind terrorizing him over what he, not in particular this case, but all of the cases. Because doesn't he say something like, all those guys, all those men, all those people I did this for? Yeah. So he's waiting for her. I've been waiting for you. That's so good. The scene is so good. It's so well acted. So I don't know, because I thought she crossed a line by hiring the guy to kidnap the Dean Walker's daughter,
kidnapped
who's
Dean
13,
Walker's daughter,
or put her in that. Right. Exactly. But we don't know if she's actually in that situation or not.
That's true.
She's saying she is, but is the 13-year-old really? And also, when you first see the Alison Brie guy, you think that guy is there to do what has happened to Nina and what has happened to all these women and what McLovin has done and all that other stuff. But you find out that that's not true. You find out that that just was a means to an end to make her walk in somebody else's shoes, to walk in Nina's shoes. And also, it's a catalyst for having Alison Brie's character to do what she does at the end of the film, which leads us to the conclusion of the film. Because would Alison Brie's character, would she have done what she did if it wasn't for the fear that she had to go through by waking up intoxicated and not knowing what this strange man is in this hotel room is when she has this great life? Would she have done that? No, that's when she realizes what happened with Nina and what she has to prove what happened to Nina. And that's why she would have kept that quiet. She would have kept that under wraps. She would have been lying about that the rest of her life, which I also think is a theme of the movie that we haven't talked about real quick. And we don't have to say anything more than the fact that people can lie to themselves so strongly as if it never happened to begin with is amazing to me. It's fascinating that human nature goes completely into denial and shuts it out. And, we see it later on with a couple other characters that we've already talked about where they had to have shut it out. They had to have locked that door on that memory, or how could they have possibly interacted with her the way that they did? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the lawyer had said, screw you, man. I was just doing my job. Everybody needs a good defense. Well, if you weren't wearing a miniskirt and she wasn't so drunk, then maybe we wouldn't be in that situation. Would that guy have gone in and beat him? Yeah. Probably. And I'm wondering, because as an audience member, that's where you have to gauge your idea of what vengefulness is. I have lightheartedly mentioned Batman a couple of times, but really there is a moral code that he steps over lines and he does things that are not legal. Yes, there's the whole thing about not using guns and not killing people and so forth and so on, but that's not always how he's been. So he has used guns and he has killed people and he has thrown people off of buildings to paralyze them to make a point. Is that correct behavior? You don't want to become a monster while you're fighting the monster. I get it. But at the same time, systemic sexual abuse is part of our DNA in this society, and we have to do something. So what do you do? If the lawyer is not going to understand it, I'm not sure as an audience member, I would have been that upset if he was beaten into submission. I would like to say, don't hit anybody, don't use any physical things. That's what I'm saying about the car bashing thing and all that other stuff. But as an audience member watching a story, what would I have felt like if he had gotten beaten up? I don't know, because it didn't happen. But the fact that she poses that question by not allowing it to happen is what's interesting to me. Because then I went, wait a second, I'm standing on my soapbox saying she deserves to do everything horrible to these people because this horrible thing has happened over and over again to women and she has to do this. But then when the line starts to become very blurred, and that guy's creepy, that guy is super creepy, the guy she hired, I don't know about him. Like, there is no other intention other than he was going to do bad things.
Yeah. I also think that his self-imposed prison is so much worse than anything that a man could do to him in 10 minutes or 30 minutes. So it really isn't even that effective of a deterrent for him.
The thing that I find fascinating about that scene is that because he accepts the responsibility and the guilt and the knowledge that he has done wrong and that he allowed men to abuse women and gotten them off, that's why he can't sleep, because his conscience won't let him sleep. It won't let him go to bed because he knows he's done wrong. And the fact that he admits it is a key to this issue. We're not asking, from my point of view as an audience member, we're not asking for people to do anything other than admit they've done something wrong. Admit it. yeah, sure, you have to pay consequences because that's the way the world works. But saying, you know what? I realized she was drunk and I did it anyway. I'm terrible. I should be going to hell for this, is what the lawyer does. And then instead of taking revenge out on him anyway, because he did do these things, she alleviates his problem. She gives him a gift by saying, go to bed. You can sleep now. So not only did him admitting his fault and what he did and the responsibility behind it, she could have very easily been like, too late, dude, and have wackadoo guy mess him up anyway. But she doesn't. She could have just walked out and been like, okay, did he learn his lesson? I don't know, but he seems to be struggling in life because of what he's chosen. But she doesn't. She goes one step further and helps him relieve his pain by allowing him to now have her voice in his head to allow him to sleep. It's really a sweet, tender moment. And it's really an important moment because if you admit your wrongdoing, even in the simplest of terms, if you tell the truth and admit your wrongdoings, your lesson and the gifts you get from that are larger than keeping it a lie your whole entire life. That's too much of a simplification for these issues that we're talking about, but that's just how I feel about it.
And also, I think that it's not only cathartic for him, it's also cathartic for her. And that's why we see her cry. And she gets to a point where she's kind of like done. She's done with the situation and she's ready to move on. She's found one person who's admitted that they did something wrong, because throughout this whole time, all the guys that she took home, all of it, all the people that she talked to about Nina, all of it, nobody's ever said that. And now finally she has someone who's realized that Nina was wronged. And so she's done. She's moving on. When she gets done with Mr. Green, she goes to Nina's house, and then she goes and talks with Molly Shannon, who's Nina's mom. And Molly Shannon says, you need to move on. It's better for Nina. It's better for you. It's better for us. She goes back to Ryan, and Ryan says, I don't know. And then she's just moping around the coffee shop, and that shot that you talked about, the Madonna shot, the Virgin Mary shot. That's when he comes back and says, let's try this out again. And that's when we get the montage. We get the Paris Hilton, them dancing in the pharmacy montage, which is great. Now, how did you feel like the tone shifted? Because that's a really dangerous point in the movie, because we are now in this situation where it's been revenge movie, and now we've got this like 5-minute section that is love story, that is a relationship developing, cute, back and forth, and it's all centered around this Paris Hilton song. Did you feel like that was a rough shifting gears? Because I felt like it was pretty natural, and looking back on it, when just even going through beat by beat the screenplay like we're doing right now, it seems like it would be a really tough thing to do, but they were able to visually kind of ease us into it, I think. And also with the music too.
Well, I've read a couple of reviews for this film, and a lot of people are talking about the tonal shifts in this film bothered them.
Really?
That the director in particular doesn't have a handle on tonal shifts. And those kind of things don't really affect me. I always know something is not right, but I'm never sure what it is. And then you'll go, oh, well, the tonal shift is weird. Like, that was weird. They were doing this, now they're doing this. That's a tonal shift. And I'm like, oh, okay. As soon as you pointed it out, I hear it or I see it. Here's the thing. Here's what I came up with. How else do you put that scene in the movie then? How else do you see her having a pleasant time with a guy? How else do you do that? You can't have it be that stark lighting of that first scene where she's drunk, and it's got that really sharp, stark white light on her. How do you subject this scene of singing a Paris Hilton song with that same tonal attitude? You can't. It has to be different. It has to be tonally different. It just does, because it's a different type of scene. If it wasn't handled so well, and if she didn't put that shelving of the store right dead center of the picture of the shot, and it's there the whole entire time, that separates them. So you're seeing what Cassie was, you're seeing what Cassie could be, and you're seeing what she will be if and when she gives herself over to Ryan, meaning dates him and really gives herself to him as a person. So I didn't have a problem with it. I don't know how you do something like that without changing the tone. Well, did I think it was inappropriate for the rest of the storytelling process? No, not at all.
It is a montage. I mean, we need the ability to just move forward in time, and it's a good montage. And then even after that montage, we get it slows down with the dinner with the family, which is endearing, and it's awkward and all of that. But at the end of that scene, we get the scene between Cassie and her dad. And that scene is, I think it's really showing us the hope that she can have and the hope that her parents have had in her all along, and that they feel like she's back. Her dad even says to her, we really do miss Nina, but God, we have missed you. And that's the key that he's trying to bring to her, is that she's been kind of like paused. She's had her life on pause, and now she's finally starting to move forward with it. And so his hope for her is rekindled. So, which is a really big scene. And I think that it makes the rest of the movie more tragic, because if it was just her banging away at some revenge vendetta, it would feel differently. But now it's like we get slammed from that scene to like Ryan and Cassie both saying they love each other, or they're falling in love with each other, to bang. She comes home, Madison shows up with the phone, and she sees this video. I mean, it is just like a hard left. And it is the writer-director being hostile with her audience, and for effect. It's that kind of stuff that reminds me of movies like Michelle Haneke movies, like Funny Games, where they are literally playing with the audience. He is playing with the audience, and it's not only subverting expectations, but it is setting up situations and then purposefully twisting the knife. And that's what she does in the scene. We didn't need to see what was on the phone. Like, there's no benefit to that. We get to see all we need to see from just her face, and then obviously hearing Ryan's voice and her reaction to hearing Ryan's voice. So that was an effective scene. And it's bolstered by the set design. We've seen every room in this house except for the living room or sitting room. And now we go in with them, with Madison and Cassie, to the living room, and it's pink carpet and these like Baroque style weird filigreed things to put your coffee cup on or whatever. I mean, it's kind of creepy. And once again, it does seem like it's shrink wrapped. Even the dining room table, the tablecloth had plastic over it. Did you notice that?
70s.
Yeah. So, so we're just already on edge in this living room because it just seems out of place.
Well, you know what I got from that? Well, first of all, the hard left is amazing. The scene with Clancy Brown represented to me that Cassie and her father have a healthy relationship, a male-female healthy relationship. So she's not out searching for men to treat her badly because her father treated her badly, because that does happen, You do recreate the patterns of your life until you can realize there are patterns and work on some kind of healthy balance to not allow those patterns to occur, to cope with it. Like you said earlier, she copes with this tragedy by doing this thing, but she's not doing it because she's had a bad influence from her father. Once again, reiterating the fact that it's not the woman's fault. She's not doing this for any other reason other than this happened to her friend, and thus happened to her. So that I thought was important. The house is stuck in time. The house is stuck in the 70s or early 80s. So is Cassie. Cassie is stuck the day after whatever happened to Nina. She's been stuck in time. And so that's why the house is creepy to me. Who to this day goes out and buys a couch and puts plastic on it? So for me, that's what that house represented, that she's stuck in time, she's stuck in a moment, and this recording is what's going to make her turn left and make everything that happens at the end of the film happen. But the fact that we find out that Ryan's voice is on there, because I think Bo Burnham has a very distinctive voice. It sounds like this surfer dude, like, I don't know, it's got this tone about it. He makes you feel at ease when he's talking. He makes you feel comfortable with yourself when he's talking. And in a way, I was like, why did she cast this guy? Is it because he seems like she would be comfortable with him? Why did she cast this guy? And then when you hear his voice, you immediately distinguished who it was. You immediately know it's Ryan. And so I'm almost wondering, other than Bo Burnham being a good actor, I'm wondering if it's because the tonal thing in his voice, the tone of his voice is so distinct. She needed that in that recording to distinguish it from everything else that was going on, even though I assumed he was the guy who was recording it. Did you get that from
No, I got it. They're like, hey, check this out, Ryan. And he's like, oh man, that's crazy. Like, whoa, what is he doing? Like, oh geez, that's crazy. But they also have him in the mix. He's louder in the mix than anybody else. Now, if you're recording on
Sure.
I guess it was a BlackBerry, so they were recording on the BlackBerry or whatever. But if you're recording on a BlackBerry or whatever, the microphone's on the other side. So it might have been where he was the closest thing to the microphone, even though what was being shown on camera was farther away. But he was still like laughing about it and wasn't doing anything about it and wasn't breaking it up or anything. He was just like, well, Alex be Alex. So,
and thus, it brings me all the way back to what I said in the beginning of the podcast. He tells you what you need to know about him by saying, you're right, spit in my cup, I'm disgusting. I deserve it. Because he does deserve it, because he was there and he could have solved this whole problem for them. He could have been a witness for them.
That's right. But when he's confronted with it in the next scene, when she comes to him while he's at work, Cassie goes to him and says, take a look at this. She also kind of like, I don't know. She kind of like sidles up to him and is like, instead of her being like, we need to talk. This is serious. Look at this. Can you believe this? She was like cuddling up to him. And I was like, ooh, that's another level.
Because the whole entire movie, he is presented as somebody that he's not. And he is presented to her. He knows this situation. He was there. He's lied about it by omission. He has, back to what I was saying, how people can be in such denial. Yeah. Forgot about it. Please, come on. I mean, come on. And so the trial didn't remind you of it. The fact that you're still friends with that guy because you get invited to his wedding doesn't remind you of it. The fact that a girl lost her life because of it. And I take it Nina killed herself. There's no mention of it per se. The fact that other people, when he goes, you dropped out. You were the smartest one in the class. Why did you drop out? You don't know deep down inside that's why, because her best friend was terrorized by your friends.
Yeah.
You know, you've just decided to place it somewhere so you can get on with your life because society says it's not your fault. So you were just watching, so you had no responsibility. So you can place it deep down inside yourself. That's why she saddles up to him. She's doing exactly what she does to all the other men. Saddling up to him is like being drunk to the other guys. She's getting him into a position to go, you can't weasel out of this because you've presented yourself like this. So I'm going to react to you as if I'm saddling up to you because you've presented yourself. By the way, wait, I'm not drunk? No, I'm not. And I'm not saddling up to you because I'm cozying up to you to say, look at this QC video. I'm doing it. So now you're trapped in the moment of, how are you going to get away with it? Up to the second before I showed you the video, you were presenting yourself as one person and you're an entirely different person.
You could have told me at any moment during our whole relationship, any of this, but you decided not to.
And I'm sure he had a conversation with himself. Oh, I can't talk to her about that because then he's going to, it would have not gotten him what he wanted. It would have not gotten him a relationship with Cassie. It would have rectified her life and solved an issue in her life, but he didn't want that. He wanted to be her boyfriend. So let me put all that stuff away. So he's been lying this whole time. I was so furious at him. I couldn't believe it. It's more shocking than what happens at the end of the film for me. More shocking.
Wow. And then he goes into this kind of like procedure of tell me you'll forgive me, let's work this out. And then the moment when she's like, no, this is not happening, then he kind of turns on her and then he goes into blaming and he goes into saying, why would you do this? And then, she says, you can't work here because you work with kids and you've got to be a nice person and somebody who doesn't do something like this. And then he says, oh, great. Then we both won't be doctors.
If he had reacted like Mr. Green, the lawyer, had reacted, there might have been a chance for them to have a relationship. Maybe not a male-female relationship, maybe a friendship, or maybe some kind of relationship on some level. But that's not what he does. He reverts right into the defensive, well, you were too drunk and wearing a miniskirt. That's what he does when he says, and he makes it about himself, which is what Dean Walker does. And her kid is a kid. Her daughter is 13. So she's a kid at that point. So that is a reiteration of, we were just kids. This is what kids do. But if people took responsibility for the choices that they made, and I can understand the guy at the end, Alex, not being able to take responsibility because it is traumatizing what he did. So how do you take full responsibility for that without realizing you're a monster for what you did? Regardless of the reason why you're going to come up with the reason why you came up with it, but to take responsibility. That's why the lawyer, Mr. Green, can't sleep, because he's had 30 more years of life than they have, living with what he's had to live with. And I'm not sure Alex or Ryan or Alison Brie's character, any of them, even 30 years from now, would have taken responsibility for it because they placed it somewhere in their psyche where they can deal with it. But the fact that he turns the table on her and says mean stuff to her as a defense mechanism for, well, why would you ruin my life? Well, this means I'm no longer going to be a doctor. Let's count the times he says me and I in that scene. Wait a second, dude. Ryan, you're missing the point. Which, of course, he has to be able to miss the point, because if he knew the point, he would have never done what he did back then. He would have told on them back then. To even be in a room when something like that happens is wrong. Even walking through, even hearing that it happened.
Having access to the video and being able to prove that what this person is saying in a court of law is false, is a lie. I mean, all of that straight down the line. So because he's not willing to lose his job as a doctor, because she threatens him, or like, I will show this to the proper people, or else you will give me the location of the bachelor party. But yeah, so once she knows the location of the bachelor party, we see her pull up to the bachelor party, take her license plate off and throw it into the woods. And then she walks up to this cabin in the woods. And we do get to see her put on her wig in the car before she does all that. And when she does that, as she's putting on the wig, you realize that her fingernails that she's had throughout the whole movie, it's the exact same color as all the colors in her wig, which I thought was amazing. Like that is next level stuff. That's so cool. And the wig doesn't even necessarily go with the nurse dress. I mean, it's just a crazy funky wig, but it's just, an extra added layer of personality to the weird, like, nurse plasticky dress thing that she's wearing. And then, so as she's walking up, we get to hear an orchestration of Britney Spears' song Toxic, which they used heavily in the trailers. And it's a perfect use of it because it's ominous and it's foreboding, and we know something's gonna go down here. And so as she's walking in, and just like the shot of her putting her feet into those red high heels, and then it just dollies up on her, and we get to see all of her right as she's getting ready to go in. It's a powerful shot, and you kind of feel this kind of adrenaline rush, like this is the final boss, if we're looking at it like a video game, and we're rooting for her. And that's what as an audience, I think that's what they're priming you for. And so we go in, and she makes all the guys drink downstairs, and then she takes him upstairs. And I guess, what was your attitude going into this scene, and what did you expect out of this scene going into it?
I don't know if I had any expectations. I have to be honest with you. I'm still so pissed off about Ryan at this point that whatever she chooses to do, good. I hope she messes them up. I'm so pissed off at everybody and their dishonesty and the tragedy that they've caused these women, that if she does something crazy and kills all of them, then okay. But she has done throughout the film things that were questionable, but only so far did she cross that line. Like, she didn't have that guy come in and beat up Mr. Green. We don't know what happened to Dean Walker's daughter. We do know what happened with Alison Brie, and that nothing happened because she tells her that. Don't worry about it. He just sat there and watched you all night long. He didn't do anything. How do you know? Because I know. I did it. Because I pretty much set you up. Yeah, I did it. And I think that her admitting that is a step in her healthy evolution. So I don't know if I had expectations, because you're quickly taken aback by how stereotypical this scene is. And it's a bunch of men at a bachelor party, and they're not going to do the right thing, because you've been presented with men after men after men in this movie who don't do the right thing. So I was thinking to myself, I don't want to know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do. I wasn't necessarily thinking, what is she going to do? I was thinking, how much further is this idea going to be drawn out? Meaning, how much further are we going to explore what men really do when we apologize for them? So I was concerned for her and her safety. So I wasn't really thinking, and side note, by the way, just to bring a little levity to this tough subject, Carey Mulligan deserves an Oscar nomination for just walking around in those pumps, because my God, what are those? They're like 14 inches high.
For me, that's what I thought was amazing, was that it was at Emerald Fennell and Carey Mulligan too. I mean, they are giving us as the audience, like I felt, okay, so Carey Mulligan's really hot. Like we know that. And Carey Mulligan is wearing something that's very sexualized, that's sexualizing her to the nth degree. And they give you the shots, like that long, dolly shot up. They give you the shots that make her look just amazingly hot and just so attractive. And even to a fetishistic level where they're close-ups and, just like kind of close-ups of like the side of her face or like her eye or, like pulling off a glove. And it's like, guys can objectify women. They're pushing us as an audience into a certain area. And we have to be the ones to say that, like, I have to own what my feelings are. Like, I have to own that I am feeling a certain way. And that, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't be in that situation. But if someone is in front of you who you're super attracted to, you're responsible for being an adult and for being a responsible human being and for not invading their physical space or you just need to be a good human being. But the film, it's a visceral feeling that can be generated, but that doesn't mean that you have to act on something like that. And like you've said, all of the podcast is that a woman can't do anything that would force a man to do something to them. Like they just can't do that. So it doesn't matter how quote unquote sexualized she is dressing up like a stripper. That doesn't give those guys the right to do something to her. So, but they don't shy away from her, from her looking really good.
Yeah. Okay. And she does. And she looks sexy, and that's okay. But we're talking about the difference between having a sexual feeling towards a woman because she looks sexy and the pumps appeal to you and the vinyl appeals to you, even if it's a fetish or not a fetish. Okay. Because I'm completely okay with fetish stuff. Good for you. If that's what turns you on, I'm all about it, as long as it's consensual. My interpretation of what you just said is that you went a long way around going, yeah, she looks really hot, but that doesn't mean that we can just abuse her if we want to. Because to me, it's different. She's sexy, but when you objectify her and make her into an object, she becomes an object that you can do whatever you want to do because you find her sexy. Not you, Josh, this second person, anybody. The issue is that men in this society think because they're turned on, they have the right to believe she wants them to do these things to her because she got them to this point.
She's asking for it, quote unquote.
Well, I've had these conversations before with different people, and I had a guy say to me, well, I mean, I was making out with this girl and, I was getting all turned on and she's getting all turned on. And then she had to go. And because I was ready, willing, and able, I thought it was her obligation to have sex with me because I was ready. And I was like, I mean, like 10 people at this party stopped and went, what did you just say? And he goes, wait, Paul, you understand what I'm saying? I said, yeah, you're defining rape. That's rape, dude. That's called rape. And that's not okay. Because you became stimulated doesn't mean that she is obligated to do anything. Your sexual being is your responsibility.
So I think that the only way for her to get Alex into a room by himself is for her to be that sexualized in that situation. And I think that, because otherwise maybe not. I don't know. These guys may be just absolute like super douches, and any woman that's breathing, they would go upstairs by herself. I don't know, but
yes, they are those guys.
You're right.
They
are those guys. I guess
guys.
maybe it just made it easier to go.
And I think the reason why she dresses up the way that she does is twofold. It's so she's not recognized because she knows these guys.
That's
and
true.
They know
You're
her.
right, yeah.
They might not remember her, but she know. And also because she knows on some level that men can't handle and have been taught not to be able to handle a sexy woman without objectifying her and turning her into somebody that you catcall across the street. She knows that look is going to put them where they are because they are going to go there regardless of whether or not she's in a nurse's outfit or if she's wearing a potato sack. They would be like, burlap is hot, babe.
I didn't know what she was going to do to him specifically, but I mean, I guess it made sense that she wanted to put Nina's name all over him, to have a mark on him, a permanent mark on him. Well, in the same way that Nina's life was permanently affected by their interaction, to the point that she killed herself. So at that point, I think it's a huge shift in the way that he's able to kind of overpower her physically. I think that Emerald Fennell is leading us up to this point where she feels threatened when she's with Alfred Molina alone, even though he didn't do anything to her, obviously. But she doesn't have him being drunk to smooth any of that out. So like he's in complete control of his facilities and he's able to get out of one of the two handcuffs. And did it seem like that whole scene? It seemed like that whole scene it wasn't over long where he was smothering her, but it definitely made you sit in it for a long time to realize what was going on. I think it did a couple things. Number one, it was unsettling. And number two, it makes you understand that every moment, every second that goes by, he has the ability to remove that pillow from her face. And all the time that she's fighting him, he has the ability to just stop. And he doesn't. He goes through with it completely.
Well, I thought to myself, somebody did some research, because you often see in films somebody smothering somebody with a pillow, and how difficult is that to do? I don't know. I hope I never know. But it sounds to me like they did some investigation of what does happen when this kind of murder occurs, because it always seems way easier in the movies than it should. And so the fact that he had to struggle so long, because it probably does take that length of time to kill somebody like that. And you're right. That's interesting that you layered that into, he does, as an audience member, you have to sit in it a long time, but also he does have the ability to stop it at any point, even if she's passed out, or there's a long time from the time it starts to the point of no return. Yeah. And so that's an interesting perspective. I never thought about it. I just thought, well, finally somebody has shot a scene where somebody kills somebody with a pillow in a movie, and it actually seems like that's what it would take to do it. You know, it always seems much easier. It's like when somebody shoots at somebody running. Apparently that's really hard to hit a running target, but they always nip him in the ankle or in, the Achilles heel or something like that, always, or shoots them all the way up their body. Apparently that's extremely difficult to do. But in movie land, that's what we've come accustomed to. Somebody runs in front of you, you can shoot them. So this is the same thing. And I think my brain was thinking to myself, this is probably how long this would take. It would take this long. It could not occur in a short. And also because of her plight, her story, her journey, to have it end so abruptly and so easily would have made a statement I don't think the director wanted to make. Not that this guy had the ability to do this. We already knew this guy had the ability to make questionable moral choices, but, and not surprising to me, he did do what he did. They acted exactly how I expected those guys to act. It's that her story is warranted of, this is how long she had to struggle with life and death. And if it had been shortened, it would have affected her storytelling process, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like the cut. I mean, the cut between nighttime and daytime, where it's just one of those. I mean, it's a practical effect where they just turn on lights, and it's meant to be a quick cut. Like literally, he has not moved 1 inch since he laid back down, and she's obviously dead next to him. So, but then they go into a close-up shot of her hand. Once again, with blood on it, because she had the scalpel in her hand, and then you get to see her fingernails and then all that. And then what's his name? Max Greenfield. You get to see his buddy come up, and that's when he gives Alex the thing that Cassie wanted for Nina the whole time. It's somebody to tell her that, it's not your fault. And that's exactly where his buddy goes to. And it's completely misplaced and it's completely false, but that is the kind of like twist of the knife that I think that they're giving us as an audience, is like, this is what ends up happening, is that they're going to figure out a way around it, just like they did the last time something like this happened. They're just going to figure it out, and it's not your fault. And, you didn't do anything wrong. Those are the two things that he says, that Alex's buddy says to Alex. And it's just sickening, obviously, but it's also just indicative of the situation that she's been fighting against this whole movie. And then they go through the burning of the body. And for the last time, we see her hand and her fingers kind of outside of the fire. And then his buddy just unceremoniously kicks it back into the fire.
What I thought was interesting about that is the actor, who does a really good job, the guy who plays Alex,
Chris Lowell.
I think he does an excellent job, because he's sitting there in his sorrow, even though it's misplaced, and he's freaking out And when Max Greenfield says it's not your fault, his whole disposition changes. And he starts to rework his disposition into, yeah, it's not my fault. She shouldn't come up here with me. And but I was just a kid. And everything he did to justify what he did with Nina, it all washes over his face at that immediate moment. And I think that's really hard to do because he's in an emotional state, the actor is. So to actually make that beat change so clearly is really hard to do. So bravo on the actor. But it also brings home to us that this is how easy it is to excuse this behavior because we've been doing it his whole entire life. And look, all he has to say is a couple of trigger words and he's okay. He's okay with taking a person's body out back and burning it.
At the same time that he's going through all this stuff and he's super emotional, it's kind of funny because his rationale is kind of word vomit coming out is that, oh my gosh, my fiance is going to be so upset with me. And it's like, that's what you're thinking about? Your fiance is going to be upset with you? So he's just in a completely different headspace. He's in not a real life headspace. Not, I just killed a woman. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's going to make the wedding difficult. And we've got a reservation for our wedding night. You know, I mean, it's that kind of stuff. It's funny. I mean, it's
unbelievable.
It's kind of funny. I mean, it's sad, but it's funny. So yeah, another way to go through it.
It's funny because it's pathetically sad. It's funny that this guy reverts to a 5-year-old. Mom's going to be mad at me because I got crayon on the carpet. Not that you burnt your brother with a lighter because you were burning a crayon. Mom's going to be mad at me because I burnt the carpet.
So we kind of have a couple of scenes where the cops are trying to figure out where Cassie is. I mean, there is the scene with Ryan and he's more of a jerk, but I mean, we kind of knew that.
It's the scene where he could have done what he did 10 years ago.
It's another off-ramp.
He could have said, I know her. She went to this house and I don't know why, but this is what happened. And it's all based on this tape right here and just did the Mr. Green thing and just told the truth. But he acts like he doesn't even know her.
Barely knows her.
Yeah, I remember her. We know each other kind of. So he's bad.
And he ends up, that's the other thing is that he goes to the wedding and she knows he's going to go to the wedding. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
So,
yep. And then, see this guy, this is the guy I'd go after. He stands there and like is disgusted by the conversation that his buddy's having about some other girl who's acting a fool. And the guy's like, yeah, she's asking for it. And she's like, this is why I think I'm going to go get her. And Ryan is like,
oh, I would never do that.
Wait, too late, dude. Too late, dude. You're there. The fact that you're at the wedding, just like you were there that night of Nina, you are as responsible and you're not even going to say anything to that guy. After everything you've learned, after everything you've been through in this whole movie, you're not going to say, dude, you shouldn't talk that way. Leave that girl alone. Leave that woman alone. Don't go near her. You're a pig. He doesn't. He just is like, ugh. Good to know you have some kind of a conscience about the situation, but don't do anything about it. Don't stand up for anybody.
Right after that.
I hate that guy. I hate Ryan.
I get it. Yeah, I feel it. Right after that is when we get to hear the first few notes of Angel of the Morning. And I mean, I've obviously heard this in other movies, but I love its use in this movie, especially since when Ryan picks up his phone in that song, there's like a da-da-da-dun, like a snare drum hit. And that's when we see the 3 dots of the message coming in from the posthumous message coming in from Cassie. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so good. And just that whole sequence of the anticipation of what the next text is going to be, and then starting to hear the sirens, and then seeing what she sent to Mr. Green, Alfred Molina's character, and that Gail found her half of the best friend's pendant. And yeah, I mean, it's just all perfect. And the fact that she wore Nina's pendant purposefully so that if they did decide to burn her body, that would still be there. Like, that's just next level stuff that you've been placing this pendant throughout the film, and she's wearing it not every time, not in every scene, but she's wearing it in a lot of scenes, and it's been prominent, just like her fingernails have been prominent throughout the whole movie. And we get a payoff for the fingernails, we get a payoff for the pendant, we get it's all right down the line. Everything is put in its right place. And even though it's not a quote unquote happy ending, it's still a just ending. So that's really cool. Oh, and by the way, Alex, the anesthesiologist, do you know what his fiance's name is? Anastasia.
Of course it is.
It's a lot. It's hilarious. Of course.
That's brilliant. See, I love things like that. That's why when people say a movie's just a movie, I'm like, not always. Not always. These things are, they're thought out and it's purposeful. But I do want to point out that the stylistic choices, which you started in the beginning, the framing, the way that she is in the dean's office and she's center of the frame, but she's lower and there's all of that negative space behind her, that the world is so large that she's approaching, that she's just this little minuscule person in the middle of the shot, is amazing to me. It says so much. And we've often talked about watching a movie without the dialogue as if it's a silent film. This would be interesting to watch like that, because I'm wondering what we would pick up if we weren't hearing verbal cues and sound cues and stuff like that. Would we pick up more of those visual cues?
There is something I noticed the second time I watched it, is that when you see the dean sitting at her desk, directly above her is a portrait of a man looking down on both of them, actually. And it's probably the president, the founder of the university. I don't know. But it's like they're in this room together, two women in this room together, but they're still being overseen by this man. And I'm sure that's purposeful. It's stuff like that where you're right. There's all these things put in place that just the fact that she uses a scrunchie around her journal, that makes it more adolescent, and it makes it...
I thought it was Nina's scrunchie.
Either way.
Since you did bring up the journal again, why do you think there's different color ink? Just because she just happens to be using different... Because some of them are red.
The way that I would look at it would be she's done it so long that a particular pen has run out of ink. And so she's had to use a different pen. But you're saying it's red and then blue and then red again?
Like one slash is black, one slash is blue, one slash is red, one slash is all in the same group of 5. Okay. So why did she use red? I'm wondering if she drew blood, like she had to draw blood on some, like to protect herself or to prove to this guy. I'm wondering, I at first I thought she was killing those ones that she marked in red, but it's too obvious of a way to go, first of all, and it's the wrong movie. That would make it the wrong movie. But I don't think it's haphazard. I don't think it's just because there's a particular reason why those are in red.
I think the payoff for the journal where she does the 4 marks and then the 5th slash to close out a group of 5. That is exactly how they start the wedding scene, where we've had Madison as 1 and the dean is 2 and 3 is the lawyer, 4 is Alex, and then 5 is the wedding. And it's got the slash across it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's perfect. So there had to be a 5. Like there couldn't have just been 4. There had to have been a 5. So we should have known from the beginning, and it all kind of fits together. So it's great. I thought this is a great movie. So, all right, well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search Actor and Engineer Podcast, and we'll see you next time.